Greetings, everyone. Welcome to another edition of Mic'd Up Sports, the show that goes in depth with the people who build our sports community. We're here on location today with Claire Francois, who will be soon earning her bachelor's degree en route to a master's. You might remember her from her days at DeLaSalle, winning a state championship back in 2019. And then you played for a little bit in college. Now you can see her coaching both AAU and the high school circuit, and who knows, we might see her down the road as a future varsity coach. But do you go by Mary or Mary Claire?
Mary Claire, or in sports, most people call me MC.
MC.
Yeah.
Well, as a broadcaster, there's a lot of MCs that I know, so I think I'll stick with Mary Claire, because MC could describe a lot of people. But thanks for stopping by and setting aside some time to chat about your history in sports. And so I just want to start with this. What would you make of your journey, having a state championship? Now you're coaching, and maybe your playing career didn't last as long as some of your peers, but you are still passionate, involved, leaving a mark in this sport.
Yeah, I mean, transitioning from playing to coaching was definitely like an eye-opening experience for me. I had kind of always undertaken that like leadership role and that vocal role, but then translating that into directing other people and helping with that was definitely it was a little bit of a culture shock. I mean, yeah, I only played a year and a half or so in college, ultimately because COVID hit and I was wanting to pursue something in the medical field. So that was a little bit of a decision that I had to make. But of course I couldn't give basketball up. So moving on to coaching has been all the more fulfilling.
So if you don't mind, we'll start at the beginning, as I typically do with these podcasts. What was your first memory in the sport of basketball? What attracted you to it, if you recall?
I mean, at first I just loved the social aspect. I mean, I was always making new friends and loud and crazy and full of energy. And so basketball was a way for me to like kind of use that as an outlet. I made some of like the best friends that I have to this day through the sport. And I mean, the first memory I have of playing basketball was probably in like first grade, playing for an intramural team. It wasn't like very structured, but it was like 3-on-3. And I loved it. I fell in love with the sport and basically stuck with that. I mean, I tried other sports and I played them, but nothing kind of fulfilled me or satisfied me as basketball did.
So you started, or you recall, doing those 3-on-3 intramurals, and 3-on-3 now is its own thing at the higher levels. But do you remember who won those games way back when, or were you not worried about score at the time?
I remember them being pretty low scoring games, but I mean, I think ultimately like my team might have come out on top. I had always been a lot taller than my classmates and my peers, especially in elementary and middle school. So that was definitely an advantage that I learned how to use at a young age, and that helped me as a basketball player.
And on that subject, of course, I had the chance to cover you and your sister when you were both high school athletes at DeLaSalle, and your younger sister is still a Division I athlete, if I'm correct. What was that like growing up? In the sport of basketball, I think you can relate. There are a lot of athletes who look like you in terms of your height, build, etc. But with the two of you growing up, how did you adapt to that identity, or how did you embrace it? What was the experience like with you and Nora being among the taller figures in your class?
I liked the physicality of being inside and being a post player, and she loved to shoot. So we played off of each other so well. A lot of like inside out game, even like shooting around in our backyard or in our driveway was her on the outside, me throwing her a pass and, posting up. And that kind of became our identity as siblings. Was we never battled for that same position because we were very different players. But we also played so well together because of that.
I suppose that makes any sibling rivalry a little less awkward because you're not fighting for the same spot on the rotation.
Yeah, exactly.
Imagine how that would have turned out. I think it would have been a draw.
Yeah.
But that's another story. And then just elsewhere, how did the two of you handle your height? That's something I ask, and not to single out my taller guests, but they often talk about the experiences of growing up and being a towering presence, whether it's in basketball or outside of it. How did you and your sister handle that part of it?
I hate to admit it, but she is a little bit taller than me. So that was honestly like a little hard to come by, but I've always embraced being tall. It's never really affected me. It came to my advantage for sure in basketball, and just kind of embraced that. It's never really been an issue or something I kind of second guess or, overthink about, so.
And I suppose when you played, you didn't have time to really think about that because you had to keep an eye out for your sister who might have set you up, or Keani Lockett later on. You had some pretty good teams, and we'll get to that in a moment. But how do you think that dynamic helped the two of you grow since you played different positions? I remember seeing the two of you where you handled things down low. Didn't always score a ton, but didn't have to with the teams that you got to play with. And then Nora, who could score from anywhere. It is really fascinating to see that the two of you are similar in height. Nora might be a few inches taller, but covering completely different positions. I know positionless basketball is a thing, but how do you think that helped the two of you sync up as well as you did?
I had always been so defense oriented. I think that might have come from being on the defensive line during soccer. And so I had always been so focused on protecting the basket, and obviously my sister being a scorer and able to facilitate those points. She kind of just did her thing, and I was more focused on stopping the other team. So yes, I did not score, thousands of points. I was more defense oriented, and ultimately that led to us winning a championship because that was drilled into us.
Well, and as we noted, you had plenty of scores, so I think that takes a little bit of pressure off you.
Yeah.
So what led you and your sister, I know Nora ended up moving schools a couple of times, but you started off at DeLaSalle, and had it not been for the pandemic, I think the two of you perhaps could have finished there. But what led the two of you, well, or you specifically, but then what led you to DeLaSalle, and how do you think that signaled your growth and development in the sport of basketball?
We had gone to private middle school, and so our school was kind of a feeder into DeLaSalle, not necessarily like a feeder school, but a lot of kids ended up going to DeLaSalle, and so that was something that we looked at. My brother, he's a year older than me in school, so when he was doing his high school visits and stuff, we kind of made that decision together because we did want to stay together. But we looked at Holy Angels, we looked at Benilde, but DeLaSalle just made sense for us because we're our South Minneapolis kids, and it was, the easiest route to get here and stuff like that. So that was kind of a family decision in some ways, and we really valued the diversity that we got from that school because we didn't have a lot of diversity in our elementary school. So seeing kids like us in kind of the same environment was very important to us.
When you mentioned the schools you were considering, I just thought to myself, imagine if you had gone to Holy Angels with the conference rivalry and, of course, meeting up at State a couple of times. There is some history between those two. But I think you made the right decision, and there is no wrong answer. So, spoiler alert, you made it work for you, and that's the important thing.
Exactly.
But you came in, and if I recall, you came in at about the same time your former head coach, Tanisha Scott, did. So, DeLaSalle, they were riding high when Faith Johnson-Patterson was there, 3 state titles, and you came in the midst of a transition, which of course culminated in some state tournament appearances and a championship for you. But what do you remember from suiting up for varsity that first time and all of the emotions, all of the thoughts that went through as you and your coach were, in a sense, both first-timers?
Yeah, it was terrifying. I remember being absolutely terrified. And as one of maybe 3 or 4 other freshmen playing varsity, we definitely felt like the newcomers and the babies, but we had some amazing leadership from the older girls that had kind of had a sense of how DeLaSalle basketball did things. And so I think that really helped both Coach T and I in our new positions. And I just kind of went out and did what I knew what to do, which was play basketball the same way I had done it for years. And just kind of, I fit in because I was in a very unique learning position, and I looked up to the older girls and really valued their leadership, and ultimately wanted to be like them. So
On that subject, who were the people, whether it was in high school or when you were younger, who did you idolize in the sport of basketball? Was there a player or coach, someone that you wanted to be like when you grew up? And there's no wrong answer, this could be anybody, but I'm curious, who was your role model as you locked into the sport of basketball?
Oh, I think it changed a little bit. I was a huge Minnesota Lynx fan. I loved watching Candace Wiggins, Candace Parker, a lot of the post players. But I'd say someone that I was close to was Chase Coley. We grew up together. She was playing at the University of Iowa when I was in high school, so I kind of had that older sister, I'll say, to look up to, and she was a big role model for me.
She was terrific, both in high school and in college, and I'm not sure what she does these days, but when she was playing, what was it about her game that really resonated with you?
She used her height to her advantage, and her length for sure. I mean, she was an insane shot blocker. She was just such a good all-around player. So I honestly really valued and appreciated watching her do everything. And it kind of inspired me to kind of, do a little more outside of the paint, or on the defensive end.
Of course, Chase has a younger sister as well, who I believe is finishing up her college career at Nebraska. And would you mind describing how that friendship grew? Because I understand you were neighbors, and even though you went to different schools, you would go to her games when you had the chance. I'm sure she would check out some of your games before she went off to play for Iowa. But what did you gain from that friendship with Chase and her family, in addition to some of the things you got to see her do on the basketball court?
Yeah, so we grew up going to the same neighborhood daycare. So I've known Chase since I was six weeks old. And
I'm sure you remember that very first meeting at 6 weeks old, right?
Exactly. No, but like I said, we went to the same daycare together. So we were together every day. Kendall and my younger sister Nora are the same age and same grade, so they were obviously closer. We did many birthday parties together, and when their mom passed away, we became even closer because we loved them and wanted to surround them with that love. And then it was probably in 3rd grade when Tyler, their dad, came up to me or said something to my mom she should really be in basketball full time. So I have a spot for her on my 4th grade team, and that's really where my organized basketball started, was with Tyler Coley, pulling me out of the crowd and introducing me to this team. And I was the underdog because I was a year younger than most of the girls that I was playing with, so I really had to set into that focus. And now I get to coach with him, so we've got a long history together. Yeah.
That story sounds exactly like him in terms of how he goes after folks and it's like, hey, well, I guess you know what? I can't complain because I do that in broadcasting where I'll talk to folks and be like, you sound like you'd be a great fit. Why don't you call a game with me? And usually they run away in fear. No, they don't. No, I do not have the athleticism that you do, but I still appreciate all the work you put in. I do have to ask you, though, Mary Claire, I know Chase was a few years older, so I don't know how many scrimmages you and your sister had with Chase and Kendall, but how did those backyard battles go if you had any 2-on-2 or scrimmages just for fun? Who won those?
I can't recall that we ever did any like scrimmaging together, but I do remember doing like, ball handling stuff or dribbling up and down the block with them or playing at the park, but I don't remember us ever scrimmaging each other rather than taking on the people that were at the park.
Okay, so it was a team effort. You wanted to take down everyone else and like, no, we're family. We stay together.
Exactly.
I think the dynamic would change a little bit now because Kendall and Nora are still actively playing and you and Chase don't play anymore,
right.
At least not competitively. So your younger sisters might have the edge there.
Yeah, I hate to admit it, but that's true.
And how do you think that carried over at DeLaSalle? We talked about that first year transition. That was the last year of Andre Adams in Como Park. But then in the subsequent years, I've noted this with your former coach, Coach T, as you call her. I call her Tanisha because I didn't have her as a coach. But she seems to get away or seems to get more out of her players and her teams than you might think with the personnel you have. We've seen her do that at Roseville now the last couple of years. It was no different at DeLaSalle. What do you think developed over the years as you became acclimated to the school on Nicollet Island?
Yeah, I mean, it was 5 days a week practicing and that intensity. And so I think a lot of us girls really felt like the intensity of that. And so I took on the role of, trying to organize stuff outside of practice to kind of build that togetherness. I mean, we would go watch basketball games together. We'd go work out together with our trainer. We did so many things outside of those hours that we did have with Tanisha that helped build the chemistry that we had on the court. I mean, I was the only one from my class that was with Tanisha all of her 4 years. And so I knew what it was like to play for her and kind of took that role of bringing other girls in and under my wing and kind of, as intense practice gets, like we still have this relationship and this bond together outside of practice and in school. So yeah, I think we really focused on our outside of basketball relationship because that really led to the chemistry that we had on the court.
Has she offered any tips since you took up coaching yourself? I know you're an assistant on varsity, but you're just getting started there and you coach an AAU team, and I know she has a lot of experience in both. Has she passed along any advice when you told her, or maybe when she found out that, hey, one of my players is coaching now? Yeah,
it was funny. We ran into each other at the Thanksgiving tournament at St. Thomas Academy. And then we actually ran into her at a tournament that her school hosted at Roseville. And she saw me coaching my JV girls and was like, why didn't you come coach for me? And I was like, well, I didn't know that was an option, but I'm happy where I'm at. And we still have that, funny banter back and forth. And I will always appreciate the insight and coaching that she gave to me. And I will always, look back on that and use that in my coaching.
Well, I appreciate that response. Otherwise, I was worried we were going to have a coaching controversy. Tanisha might try to pull you. And I think she knows Tyler. There's an extended family here. That could have been really awkward.
Yeah.
But over the years, and I noted that wherever she goes, Tanisha finds a way to get more out of her players. But at DeLaSalle, and who knows what would have happened had she stayed there, but that's for another day. But over those years, she was able to add quite a bit of talent, either through players that came over or players that simply developed and came through the DeLaSalle pipeline, because I recall you and your sister, of course, handled duties. Kiani Lockett came over and had to battle through some injuries, but she turned into an integral piece in the years she was at DeLaSalle. NJ Weems, who is now playing at Lamar. You had a lot of talent surrounding you, and it goes back to the role you were comfortable with, being the defensive stopper. But over the years, as those players came in to help build up the program, build up the team, what did you sense in terms of their development and their cohesiveness when you got to work alongside some Division I caliber players?
I mean, they were all phenomenal players, obviously, coming in, and we did have to battle through a lot of adversity with injuries and players leaving or new players coming. But I mean, I have to give all the credit to them, because they were amazing at adapting to anything that was thrown at them. And they really took to wanting to build the chemistry as a team and taking part and buying into the things that we were doing in the DeLaSalle, culture. So yeah, I'd have to give them all the credit. It was all them. They were amazing people on and off the court. So.
And of course, as you talked about, it culminated in a state championship back in 2019. What do you remember from that season? I know Kiani was recovering from an ACL injury and couldn't join the team until midway through the year. And I don't want to say DeLaSalle snuck up on people, but early on with the injuries, there were some bumps in the road, but by the end, with the team at full strength and utilizing all of the pieces in place, they pulled off one heck of a run. I remember watching that 3A championship with Becker, and it was a convincing victory. Of course, no matter how it comes, you'll take it. But what do you remember from that year, and when did you get that feeling that we could bring a title back to the island?
I would say the first day of our preseason workouts. Tanisha had brought in a new trainer who was really focusing on agility stuff, strength, conditioning, and all that. And so even outside of the allotted practice and weightlifting hours that we had, we would go to the Y and work out with him on the weekends, or we would go to the Y where T worked and, shoot around. And we did a lot outside of what we were doing on campus at DeLaSalle. So the first pre-season workout we had, we were like, we want this so bad, so let's do it. And yes, we had some injuries and stuff, but we believed that they would be able to come back and still continue doing what they were doing before they were hurt. So I mean, yeah, it was a hard-fought season, and we had to beat Holy Angels 3 times to get to that final game. And I just remember everyone saying, it's tough to beat a team 3 times, but I never had a doubt that we wouldn't be able to do that, because we all had that fire inside of us, and we had all been to the state tournament before and fallen short. So we wanted it so badly that year.
That's right. I think you were knocked out in the quarterfinals those first 2 years. Mm-hmm. And that Holy Angels battle, and I forget what the percentage is on playing a team 3 times. Even if you pull it off, I've noted that the more you play somebody, the harder it can be. And sometimes I've seen matches go the other way. But typically, when you have 2 high-caliber teams and you meet for that 3rd time, there are no secrets. Everybody knows everybody. It comes down to execution. And you had to sweat that one out. That much I remember. It was NJ who got you the game winner. But what do you recall from that 3rd meeting? you were saying you heard how tough it is to beat a team 3 times, and I think when you get to the state tournament round, in some cases it's going to be tough no matter who you face because you're playing against fellow section winners, so
Right.
there are no bad teams per se. But that semifinal was a huge hurdle. Not that you were the underdog, but you had to grind it out. What do you remember from that meeting, and how relieved and satisfied were you and your team when NJ got that game winner and you were able to hang on and play for that title on Saturday?
NJ and I actually still text back and forth about this because I threw that pass from the free throw line to her, and it was like, over the head lob, and I was like, looking back at it, like watching it, it still makes me nervous because I'm like, what if that could have gotten picked off or, stolen? Like, that was so risky, but that's what we had done all season was the dump down and finding and utilizing our inside players. We still watch that video all the time and send it back and forth between us players, and it's such an amazing moment, and it really encapsulates everything that we had done that season. Was our inside out game was so strong, and relying on our teammates and trusting them with finishing that basket. So
I may have a suggestion. If that if that pass didn't work, what would have happened? Well, outside of the tournament, I think you still would have been in position to get your master's degree.
Yeah, exactly. Exactly.
I think you would have been all right, but I understand. Again, I can't relate directly because I didn't have that athleticism, but I understand in the moment it can be intense as a player, and you're going through all of these decisions, but as you explained, you went to a play that you had practiced many times over. You knew you could pull it off. You knew NJ could finish the job, and that's cool that years later, the two of you still text each other with that play.
Oh, yeah.
And I suppose for the two of you, the great part about it is every time you watch it, the shot goes in.
Exactly. And I still get that same excitement watching it over and over again. Like, I can still remember that feeling of, thank goodness she made it, and this clinches, where we're going for the next game. We want that win.
And I've gotten the chance to know NJ over the years as well. I remember T really advocating for her as a player, as a person, and what she's done is remarkable in its own right. But how do you think that play perhaps symbolized the friendship the two of you had? Obviously, it struck a chord because you're still texting each other with that play. But how do you think that sequence represented the friendship and the camaraderie that you have with NJ?
There was so much trust between us. We became very close my junior and senior year. I'd pick her up, we'd go watch games together, didn't matter who, like we just wanted to be watching basketball. And same with a lot of the other girls, like Savannah and Kiani. We had like our own like little nickname. They became like family, and we did everything together. And building that relationship with each other and showing our trust for one another really translates into that last play. NJ and I had done that time and time again, whether she scored the bucket or not, but I had the trust in her to finish that play. And so did everyone else on the court. Our inside-out game was unstoppable when she was in. So she honestly deserves all the accolades for that.
Well, that's why she's playing at Lamar now, I think. Yeah. Maybe undersized for her position, but I remember covering her as a senior. When she got positioned down low, forget it.
Right.
You weren't moving her out of the way.
Exactly.
Now, if you don't mind me asking, what were some of the nicknames? What nickname did you get from that group? Because I know Kiani, NJ calls her my point guard.
Yeah.
And hers, I don't know if it came from you, but one of them is Kiwi. I may get in a whole lot of trouble for all of these secrets I'm spilling out here, but my apologies, NJ. But were there any nicknames that you got from that group?
I became like mom to them. I honestly, because I was like one of the only seniors. I mean, because Elena or E got hurt, midway through our senior year, so she had to really take a sideline role. So, I became team mom. I was like the only one with my license, and so we went everywhere together, picked them up for practice, whatever, and we called ourselves like foster family or the demons. But yeah, I mean, it's so fun to look back on.
I think demon sounds a lot better than foster family. I get what you're saying.
Yeah.
I could only imagine how many texts you got when you were the only player who could drive others around.
Right.
It's like, Mary Claire, or Mom.
Exactly.
And I think NJ came over from Oakdale.
Yeah, she had.
So there was a bit of a trek there. You were in Minneapolis, so not that far away, but being a private school, right, your students could come from anywhere. So how many miles did you rack up having to ferry all of your teammates?
A lot of miles.
Did you save them on an invoice? Like now that NJ and Kiani, now that they're all D1, have you thought about collecting those receipts?
Gas bill? Yeah, right. No, I mean, and at the time, like the last couple months of our season, I didn't have my own car because my brother and I had shared a car, and he had gotten in a car accident or some issue. So I was taking my mom's car, like leaving my mom stranded at home because I was like, Mom, I have to go get the girls. Like, we have plans. Like, I'm sorry. We're going to play basketball. Like, it's what you'd want us to be doing on a Friday night or on a Saturday night. So I put a lot of miles on my mom's car those last couple months. But I don't regret anything.
Well, just keep that in mind. If NJ and Kiani are lucky enough, or Savannah too, she's at Wisconsin last time I checked. If they get any NIL deals, that's when you're like, hey, remember all those trips? I tease, of course. It sounds like you had a lot of fun with that. You wouldn't trade any of it. And I think, in a way, that further symbolizes the chemistry you had, that you were willing to go fetch all of your teammates and go through all of the car rides. I'm sure there are plenty of stories and conversations in those trips to whatever game you were going to or practice. I could only imagine some of the conversations or chats that took place.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, I mean, such a fun group of girls. We always had like our little inside jokes with each other, and I mean, I forever feel like I have like a big sister role with them, and I will always keep tabs on them. And I mean, I got to go watch NJ play my sister in New Orleans earlier this year. So that was so fun to like see them, and I hadn't seen both of them. I hadn't seen NJ play since high school, so that was an amazing game to be at.
Who do you end up rooting for in that New Orleans-Lamar game? I mean, do you pick a side? I don't think you could.
No, I couldn't. I picked cheering for Nora and NJ, and when they were guarding each other, it was like, whatever happens here.
Just don't get hurt, right?
Right, exactly.
It's like, as long as they are healthy by the end of the game. Something I've learned in situations like that, because I've gone to some Gophers games or St. Thomas, and if I'm going to see players who represent both teams, I just cheer for whoever's trailing.
Right.
So whoever's behind, then I root for them.
Right. Yeah.
I can't lose that way. But I know what you mean. Being there and having friends on both sides, you're like, So one thing, though, you said you were a big sister. I thought you were their mother. You just said you were team mom.
Yes. I mean, that's what they called me, but I look at it more as a big sister role. Especially now that I'm not driving them around everywhere.
Yeah, they're old enough. They can drive themselves.
Exactly.
You're all grown now. Of course, part of that growth included the state championship with Becker in 2019. That one was close until the end. And then that demonic defense, if you don't mind me borrowing that term, helped you pull away and clinch victory. How exciting was that? I know everybody wants to go to state, at least the teams that think they have a chance would love to do it. Unfortunately, only one team can win. And I say that as a broadcaster who roots for everybody. But how exciting was that to know that you got to play a part in history and add another championship to a pretty lengthy legacy at DeLaSalle.
It was amazing. I still remember that like sigh of relief that I felt those last, that last minute or two when I got subbed out for the final time. I still remember that, like, the emotions that came over me. I mean, it was such a hard-fought season. We wanted it so badly, and doing it and getting to that point was amazing. It was that relief that we all felt it finally paid off, and a reminder that, hard work does pay off, and the focus and the grit and the tenacity that we had was all worth it.
And then from there, you went to St. Catherine, played for a season and a half. What do you remember from the college recruiting experience? How many offers did you get, and what led you to settle on St. Catherine?
I mean, I had been looking all over. I mean, and Tyler, with his connections to schools, he had gotten me some amazing looks and stuff, but I felt the need to stay close to home because my sister was struggling coming back from her injury and transitioning. She moved schools, and she was just struggling outside of basketball, and had really lost that foundation and that love for the game that she had. And so I knew I wanted to stay close to home. And so my mom went to St. Kate's, and she also got her nursing degree there. So I had that connection with them. I really liked the girls that were there. I had played some of them in high school. Jackie Radford from Cretin became my teammate. And so, or Donica from St. Croix Lutheran, just I knew those girls, and it felt like home, and it felt like an easy transition. And so I made the right choice for me. And I mean, I appreciate the head coach, obviously, there, but the assistants were really what drew me into the program. And now one of the assistants that was there my first year is coaching with me this summer. So we still have that relationship, and I just valued him and his perspective and his energy and what he brought to the game so much that I'm still learning from him. So.
And of course, your first season had a wild ending. It was just as the pandemic hit in full force. So we didn't have any tournaments at the higher levels, and the state tournament was canceled. So we never got that DeLaSalle Becker rematch at the high school scene. And then you were telling me you gave it another go the following season, and then decided to make the switch to a full-time student. What do you remember from that tumultuous month or year or so, really, where we had all of these pandemic protocols put in place? I guess in what ways do you think that influenced your decision? Or maybe it didn't, but when you had to account for that, how do you think that played into your decision to step away from the game and focus on another avenue?
Yeah. So the season had just wrapped up like a week and a half previous to when everyone had gotten sent home. So we did get to play like that entire season through, but then it was like, oh, we get an extended spring break. And then it was like, no, you're going to be home for a while here. And so then I just got used to finding that comfort at home. And my childhood home is 8 blocks away from where the murder of George Floyd happened. And so I threw myself into that. I started a nonprofit out of all the work that I had done through that. And that became my number one focus, was helping kids that look like me, but might not have the privilege that I have, because I do come from, a white background. My mom is white. My dad's an immigrant. I'd been privileged to go to private school my whole life. So I was in a place where I felt like I could give back and I could do something for the neighborhood that I grew up in. And so I took on that, and that was my number one focus. And then once basketball started up again, it was we're going to practice, every week, but we don't know if games are going to be a guarantee. And then our schedule came out, and it was 8 games, 4 versus St. Olaf and 4 versus some other team. And it was like if. It wasn't even a guarantee. It was like if things work out. And I just couldn't dedicate, I had done the math, I couldn't dedicate like the 180 hours of practice to maybe only get to play, those 4 games. So stepping away was a decision that I made because I had found something else that I wanted to give my full attention to, and also just because I wanted to be a nurse and wanted to pursue something in the medical field, and I couldn't give up my position if I had to quarantine because I got exposed during basketball. So that was kind of the decision that I was faced with. But then when the coaching opportunity came along, that pulled me right back into basketball, and it felt like I'd never left.
Are you still running that nonprofit?
I've stepped away from like doing the day-to-day work and stuff, just because I am trying to focus on school and graduate in the next month. But it's still part of my story and part of my history, and something I'm very, very proud of. So.
And I'd like to think it's something you can return to once you finish up your studies, because you still have a lot to look forward to. If you don't mind, what was the goal of the nonprofit, and maybe what role do you see it playing once you complete your studies and can devote more time to it?
So during all the protesting that was happening in my neighborhood, I was going out and, doing my part with that. And then I saw that there was a need for like water bottles and masks because we were still in the midst of a pandemic. So I started like this little fundraiser, and my goal was like $1,000, and like almost overnight, and then a few days after that, we had raised close to $40,000. And so I was like, well, we got to do more with this. There's so much more that we can do. And so my neighbor across the street, who I was very close with, who I'm very close with, we kind of set out to do this together, was, documenting what was going on in the neighborhood, helping out where we saw the need. And we ended up paying for like the porta potties and the sanitation stations and the barriers and the flowers and a lot of the stuff that they use to kind of preserve the memorial. And then from that, we just kept growing. We were trying to bring new hope to the city with projects that we were doing with youth in the area. And then as school came back around, being a student myself, I knew how tough it was to be stuck at home trying to do online school. So we opened up a facility where students came to us for, socially distanced, safe support because their parents were essential workers or whatever, to really get that focus and support that they needed to continue to thrive in school because they would be left behind. So that was my role, was youth director, working with kids, trying to keep them on track so they wouldn't fall behind because they didn't live in Edina like their white counterparts, or they didn't have the privilege and the opportunity to stay on track. So yeah, that was my role.
And something tells me we might see you take up that role again when you complete your studies. An understandable reason to kind of set aside that, and no matter what, though, I think you'll be making a difference, whether it's in nursing or through this nonprofit, if you decide to start it up again once you're able to commit the time that was necessary. Because from what you described, I can certainly understand why you had to step back. There was a lot of resource and time management involved.
Right, yeah. And thankfully I had 2 co-founders, and we had wonderful staff with us that could take over my position and my roles. And we shifted our focus after kids were back in school to the homeless population. And so they're still doing that work today. I'm just not on the boots on the ground, 24-hour,
Well, you traded that pair of boots for a pair of coaching sneakers, I guess, or I don't know what your outfit is when you coach. But earlier you mentioned Tyler using his connections to help you along. What gave you that itch to take up coaching at such a young age? Because I don't see a lot of folks in your position coaching, usually in AAU. I rarely see them at the high school level. I've seen a couple help out on AAU club teams, but it's a rarity to have someone as young as you are take on that responsibility. And it sounds like you're enjoying every minute of it, but what motivated you to take up a coaching profession?
Yeah, as Tyler had taken up the director of the FBC North branch of things, he couldn't dedicate, a full season of him coaching just one team. He had to focus on, the 5-6 teams that we had in our club. So he needed someone to step in and take that role. So I was honestly just kind of thrown into it. I didn't know what I was really getting myself into. And the girls that I was coaching were, at the time, they were, I think, sophomores in high school. Freshmen. They were freshmen. And so, they were higher level girls, so they really just needed, some structure and organization with things. And I could do that. I knew all my plays and all my go-tos from my days of playing. So it was a good transition for me. And I learned so much in that summer of basketball. And then once that had ended and school was starting up, and then Tyler called me and said, well, what are you doing this basketball season since you're not playing anymore? And I was like, school, I don't know. And he's like, well, do you want to be my JV head coach and my varsity assistant this year at Maranatha? And I was like, why not? So that it was an easy decision to say yes, because I've looked up to him my entire life almost, both as an uncle or as a coach. So it was the easiest yes, and to this day, best decision I've made. I went from, being a DeLaSalle player playing Maranatha to now coaching at Maranatha. So I love it.
I think something you'll learn is when you take up the coaching route, your allegiances can change.
Oh, yeah.
I have a couple of things related to that. Have you taught anyone that dump down move that you pulled off all the time with NJ? Have you been able to teach that or pass that along to your players?
Yeah, a couple of them. But mostly I really instill my defensive passion in my girls, and, really try to drill that into them, is how important defense is, because you can score, you can put as many numbers on the board as you want, but if you can't stop the other team from doing the same thing, it doesn't matter.
I'd like to think, though, that whether you take up varsity someday or take your club team to a high level or a bar level in those tournaments, one of those dump down moves, I'd like to think that dump down will play a part.
Yeah, we'll see it eventually.
You'll see, just like NJ pulled off with you all those years ago. What have you learned about yourself having to shepherd all of these younger kids? You got a taste of that of sorts, but being a chauffeur is a little different when you were picking up your teammates at DeLaSalle compared to all of the practices involved, whether it's the JV team at Maranatha or your club team. And in both cases, you're working with a different cast almost every year. What have you learned through that experience, and how do you think that will help you move forward either in coaching or in your career?
I've learned to really look at each player's strengths and weaknesses and how to really fit those together, because ultimately that's what it comes down to, is if you can be the best player, but if your team isn't used to playing with someone like you, or doesn't know how to feed you the ball, or build you up, then it doesn't matter, because it's not a one-man show. It's 5-on-5 for a reason. So really focusing on each girl's individual strengths and trying to bring those together is my role, I think.
And what advice would you have for someone who maybe is in your position? Because again, there's a lot of responsibility involved. You don't seem to have any trouble handling it, but to jump into the coaching ranks so soon after your playing career, if anyone out there is looking to take up a similar path, what have you learned so far that you would pass along to prospective coaches, whether it's high school or AAU?
I would say consistency. Have that consistent showing up for your girls. Stay consistent with your practice and what you guys are doing on the court. Just being consistent with things you're able to build that trust and those relationships, and the girls will eventually look up to you for it.
And of course, as I think we've alluded to as well, even if they don't go to the next level, there's still a lot of value that all of these athletes, past and present, can bring. I think you picked up on that through your time as a player and now a coach. And even though your playing career, maybe you didn't finish out your college career the way others did, when you look back on your time as a basketball player, how do you think that strengthened you?
Up until the point when I stopped playing, it was following through with everything. And my senior year at DeLaSalle we knew that we could win the state championship. We knew that we could make it. So we just had to put in the work and follow through with things. And I would say just putting in the work to do something, trusting the process, and following through with it is so important. I didn't get to finish my college career the way I would have wanted to, but life got in the way. But I'm still connected to basketball, and I'm still able to kind of pass on my knowledge to other people and still be an influence in the game.
And I think it feeds into a few questions that I like to ask of all my guests, just to highlight how you're much more than what your stat line says. But even though you're still a younger player, a younger student, I should say now, if you were able to meet up with a younger version of yourself, whether it's 6 weeks old when you first met Chase or maybe a few years older, with everything you've experienced as a player and a coach, what would you tell a younger version of yourself?
It's all going to be worth it. The people that I've met through the game of basketball, the coaches that I've had, the players that I'm now coaching, it's all worth it. It all came together. It all makes sense to me. Basketball is life, in a sense that the people around me I met through basketball, the people I look up to are involved in basketball. It's all encompassing.
And another question is based on one that comes up with the Breakdown Guidebook, and I like to throw it out there because it usually reveals something fascinating about my guests. But what would you say is the most unusual thing about yourself that people wouldn't know if they met you for the first time? And this can be anything. It doesn't have to be weird per se, but just some fun fact, something that folks would say, I didn't know that about you, or I didn't know, I didn't see that coming.
Oh boy. There's something interesting about me. I can't really think of anything. I'm kind of coming. I'm on the drawing a blank here.
Well, you did start that nonprofit.
That's true. That's true.
Between that and getting the Team Mom nickname, but those are some of those things, and so it could be a hobby, it could be an interest, it could be anything. If something comes to mind.
Hobby or an interest.
Or some unique talent. There are no wrong answers here, Mary Claire.
Wow, I really have no unique talents, but I'm really drawing a blank here. I mentioned earlier that my dad's an immigrant, so I come from a big family. I have 5 other siblings. Some of them are half siblings, but I really value family. I mean, that might not be surprising to some people, but family's a huge thing for me.
And maybe to you, that's not the most interesting thing in the world, but even if you have a hard time coming up with something interesting, at least you have that dump down move down pat, right?
Exactly. To this day, I think I could still do it.
And like I said, there are no wrong answers, so I'm sure your family will enjoy hearing that one. And looking back at your time in the sport of basketball, what would you say was your most exciting moment and your most embarrassing moment?
Ooh, my most exciting moment would have to be winning the state championship. I mean, coming out of the game, hearing everyone chanting my name, like, brought tears to my eyes. And just watching those, like, moments in the state tournament that we have, those are very exciting to me. My most embarrassing moment would probably be in 4th grade on a fast break layup. No one around me, and I just pulled up at the free throw line and completely airballed. And my coach that I had from, 6th grade on still would talk about that to this day. Is on a fast break, you could have gone for the layup, but you pulled up for a jump shot and you just completely missed it. So that's probably my most embarrassing moment.
Was that the play that led you to focus on defense with like, all right, I'm going to focus on defense so I never airball a jump shot again, right?
Exactly. Yeah, exactly. I mean, I was never like the leading scorer. That was never my focus. So I think that was maybe the turning point for me, or knowing that, I can pull up at the free throw line and throw a dump down pass rather than an air ball. Maybe it was a pass, but
I was going to say, well, the problem on a fast break though, you'd have somebody with you.
Exactly.
So if you're by yourself, you could try a dump down, but there's not going to be anybody there.
Right.
But as you were saying, there are a lot of ways to contribute. We talk about scoring a lot, and part of it is the lack of data that's available with some teams. So all I get are scoring numbers, and I can't look at, how many rebounds or assists did this person get? But you're right, so many ways to influence the game. And even if you didn't score a ton of points, you were able to get something out of it. And it's clear that this sport has given you a vessel far beyond whatever stat lines would say about you and your game.
Mm-hmm. Absolutely. Absolutely. I mean, my senior year, I really took on the role of being the assist, like throwing that perfect pass, finding the perfect gap to throw the pass through that was my thing, was making that extra pass. I was a very selfless player.
And is there anything else you'd like to add about this journey in basketball? We've covered a lot of ground, but maybe there's another story or memory out there that we haven't touched on.
I mean, people always asked what it was like playing with my sister. I mean, it wasn't all, gumdrops and rainbows. We definitely had our moments. And I mean, we were together all the time, especially during basketball season. So I'm sure we definitely like made a few people worried with our bickering and our fighting, but we spent so much time together, living together, riding to practice together, going to school together. So yeah, sometimes we didn't have our best moments on the basketball court, but that's still my baby sister.
And I'm sure it's no different with any of your other teammates.
Right.
I mean, everyone thinks it's all hunky-dory. It's all
absolutely
sunshine, rainbows, like you said, peaches, cream. And there are going to be moments, no matter what team you play for, no matter who your teammates are. Not every day is going to be a great day, but it sounds like you and Nora had far more good days than bad ones.
Yeah, absolutely. Absolutely.
And you still love her enough to go down to New Orleans and watch her play.
Of course. Yeah. Oh, yeah.
Well, and I was gratified to hear that she was going to get the chance to play college ball. I had an inkling of some of the things that she was dealing with, and to see her find a way back into the sport and to continue the way she is, I'm sure that makes you a proud big sister.
Absolutely. Absolutely. I mean, she was a phenomenal player. I mean, and if I could have switched places with her, I would have, because watching her go through what she went through and trying to fight her way back to, what she was and what people expected of her was so hard on her mentally. So I'm so incredibly proud of the progress that she's made to get back to her true self and not what people needed from her.
And as an added bonus, it gives you a chance to get away from all the snow at least once or twice a year, right?
Exactly. Oh my gosh, it was amazing to go visit.
I felt the same way going down to Dallas and then coming back up here right after that March blizzard.
Oh my gosh.
But that's another story, and I would love to have Nora on this podcast. Maybe she'll watch this and we'll find a way. But again, I have nothing but respect for the two of you because of what you have done to make a difference in the community, whether it's Nora playing in Division I to signal that redemption arc that you spoke of, or in your case, starting up a nonprofit, now taking up coaching, going for your master's, and giving yourself bountiful options when you get that master's degree.
Yeah, absolutely. Yep. Couldn't have done it without basketball, that's for sure.
Well, Mary Claire, thanks for the conversation. I learned a lot about you, and I think if there was a little more time, it would open up so many new avenues. So your teammates might be a little mad at me for all of the embarrassing secrets I revealed about them, but I think we'll let it slide. But no, it's clear you have a lot of respect for the people you've met, and even if things weren't always great, it's touching to hear that you still carry that with you. And I have a feeling that satisfaction or that appreciation will only grow as you continue your arc in coaching and in studies, and who knows what else will come your way.
Yeah, and I will always be their number one supporter, and I'm always watching their games on ESPN and keeping tabs on them. So,
well, I'm sure they'll do that when next season comes along, and I would hope they keep tabs on your team as well when there's a chance to watch your FBC games. But thanks again for stopping by, Mary Claire, and I can't wait to hear what the next chapter of your story looks like.
Thank you. Thank you for having me here.
So Mary Claire Francois, you can see her on the AAU circuit for FBC North over the spring and summer months, and then next season you might see her back at Maranatha, and who knows, maybe a varsity team will come calling. You just never know, but chances are you'll see Mary Claire coaching on a court somewhere. And if you have a story you'd like to share with us, all you have to do is get a hold of us on social media at @TheMikePeden. If you've got a good story, we're happy to share it. So until next time, thanks for watching.